So welcome everybody to another episode of Stuck, Time to Improv, with advice for startup businesses and all the good stuff you need to know to be wildly successful in your brand new business venture. And I'm so happy today. We're going to be talking about social media for startups with the lovely and talented Martine Cadet, who is a social media maven. So thank you for coming, Martine. It's so nice to see you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary. Hello to anyone watching live or watching the replay. So great to see you.
Very cool. Okay, so we're talking to startups. And what are some of the first questions people ask you when they want to get started with good social media for a new business?
What a great question, Mary. A lot of people, when they first start thinking about marketing using social media, come to me and ask me two questions. One is, how many times should I be posting content and which platform should I be on? There are so many of them, right? We're here on Facebook. There's also LinkedIn. There's Twitter. The list goes on and on and on. And we tend to get overwhelmed because there's so much information out there. If you go on YouTube University, which I'm sure a lot of us do, you will notice a lot of tutorials and trainings in regards to all of those social media platforms. And so the two main questions that I always get from startups is, which platform should I be on? And once I select this platform, how many times should I be posting?
I usually tell startups, you need to think about where your customers are and what social media are your customers likely to be spending most of their time in. And that's a good place to start, usually. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The last thing we want to do, Mary, is show up in a place where we do not have traction. Because one of the things that's evolved with social media over time is that it's more about the engagement, right? It's no longer about getting the likes and the followers. It's really about building that authentic relationship with our audience. And so the last thing we want to do as startups is putting in energy in places where, to your point, our customers aren't there. I'll share with you a quick story. I remember having one of my clients coming to me and saying, straight up, I'm going to be sharing content on Instagram and on LinkedIn. Now, as a social media coach and creator, part of my responsibility for my clients is to not only develop a content strategy for them, but it's also to create it with them, right? And so the story was, we created content for both her Instagram and her LinkedIn. And a few weeks into doing that, we realized that the traction was more on LinkedIn. And so I took a step back and we met, my client and I said, well, have you noticed that you're getting more traction on LinkedIn versus Instagram? And she had a light bulb moment. She's like, well, that makes sense, because what I'm sharing, the message that I have and the service that I offer is actually for an audience that is hanging out on LinkedIn. And so we had to shift our content strategy for her to focus on the LinkedIn platform. And so to your point, absolutely important to understand that wherever you are marketing is where your clients are, so that you can reach them and engage with them and serve them. So yes, definitely. And the second thing I would add to that is making sure that you are on the platform that you enjoy creating content for, right? There are a lot of platforms now that are giving us, most of them are giving us all the same features. We could create videos, we could go live on Twitter now, right? So at the end of the day, once you identify where your ideal client is, now it's going to be about you identifying the type of content that you're comfortable creating, so that you can show up in the most authentic side of you, authentic self of you, when you're creating that content. But definitely nailed it, Mary. It's all about showing up in the place where you know your clients are.
And just because your favorite platform is not necessarily where your clients are, doesn't mean you abandon it altogether, because the combination of platforms help people see different facets of you and get to know you, like you, trust you as a human being. And sometimes that's really important, particularly when you're starting with something brand new.
Absolutely. And to your point, we are using the word platform, right? And what I like to share with you is, social media is a tool. And so we're here on Facebook. We don't know how long this platform is going to last. I don't know if you recall a couple of years back, we had Instagram blackout and Facebook blackout, and a lot of people freaked out and they're like, oh my gosh, my business is over. That's because they were focusing on building a business for the platform versus thinking about these platforms being tools to connect with their audience, right? And so I love that you brought this up, Mary, because as startups, one of the things that we need to make sure is set up the right mindset when it comes to our social media, I believe. And for that, I mean, using it as a tool and understanding that this is a way for me to use this platform, share my voice, and connect with my audience. Now, as a business owner, we need to reverse engineer and make sure that we're set up so that in the back end, whether it's through an email list opt-in or perhaps some sort of text messaging services that you offer when you show up so that you can continue that connection. And so social media is the start. It's the handshake, right? It's the handshake wherever you are. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, it's the handshake, but you have to remember that they are tools and they change constantly, right? They change constantly and we constantly have to adapt to them, which means that we need to ensure that we protect our brands by ensuring that we have a back-end system that helps us continue that conversation with whomever is in connection with what we share.
Right. So you've got to have a point where you can capture email and content from people who like you, but also be using your videos and your marketing messages as that, where you can create something that might be very pertinent to today's news, but something might be very pertinent and an evergreen that you can post again someplace else in the same format. Often you can change the name of the video and post it again. So that way you own your content, it's your content. And how you're using it to reach out, just because people saw it 3 months ago doesn't mean there aren't a whole new audience that need to see it now.
I love that.
Use it
Very,
as a
very
tool.
important.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very important. And as startup, one of the things that gets very quickly overwhelming is creating content. And I love that you pointed out the whole repurposing process of content, because that's going to alleviate the pain of thinking, what am I going to share now on Instagram? What am I going to share on LinkedIn? And the way to avoid that is by doing just that. What you just shared, Mary, is by repurposing and making sure that you understand each platform and how they work and how they are being consumed so that you can repurpose for that platform. It's important to make sure that you're creating, and you pointed out, evergreen content. I love that. I love that because I see so many startups showing up because they're launching a program, which is fine, and then they disappear. What I like to share with my clients, and I encourage them to do, is creating that evergreen content. So that way they're continuously recycling and they're seeing themselves more and more out there visible, yet it's the same content, but it's repurposed, right? So very, very good tactic. Love that strategy. Something that I use a lot is repurposed.
And something I always use is that I record all my videos on my own computer. So it's not direct to Facebook Live because I want to be able to have that file that I can edit. And if you're going direct to YouTube or direct to Facebook Live, you're kind of stuck with what's there, and you may or may not be able to download it and use it someplace else. So save your files as movies or MP4s, and then you've got a lot more control over them, as well as better hold on the copyright.